We'd like to welcome each and every individual to Voices of Integrity and Coffee Connections. And so today there's going to be a working session, so it's going to be all over the place. I have a feeling. Kenny owns a number of companies. One of his companies is too successful. It's just making too much money. And he's got just extra money sitting around, doesn't know what to do with it. So he's thinking about lending it out. Wouldn't that be a cool problem to have, Bill?
Yeah, it sure would. Yep.
These young guys, I tell you, he must have a good mentor. That's what I can say. Or he's just really smart. I don't know. So we'll address that real quick. So in lending money, there's a saying. So I used to own a mortgage company. When I was in my 20s, late 20s, I owned a mortgage company. So I'm very familiar with the mortgage industry, and there's a joke that the bank will only lend you money when you don't need it. And so that's kind of the joke in the industry is if you need money, the bank says, well, you can't afford to have the loan. If you don't need the money, then they'll say, oh, we'll give you the loan. And so you're essentially looking at, Kenny, their ability to repay. And so the two types, this is interesting. I think you guys will find this interesting, fascinating. And so there's two types of people, groups of people that the bank doesn't like to go ahead and lend to. You guys want to guess on who those two types? What's that?
Business owners?
No, they like those typically. So the two types that they don't like to go ahead and lend to is churches and strip joints. Any ideas why a bank puts those both in the same category?
That's interesting.
Right? That's what I'm saying. This is why you come to Coffee Connections, the virtual, because you just find really? I remember the commercial broker. He said, Mark, this is important for you to understand. Because I was trying to get a loan for, refinancing the church that my dad was a pastor at. And he says, Mark, there's two types of groups of people that the banks don't like to go ahead and loan to. I said, okay. He says, one is churches and the other is strip joints. I'm like, really? And it's for the same reason, but different motivations. When a bank doesn't want to foreclose, they don't make any money. They just lose money. So they don't want to foreclose. So they don't want it in the paper that they're foreclosing on a church. That just makes them look bad. They don't want them foreclosing on a strip club because that just makes them look bad too. So banks don't want to foreclose. They just don't. They just don't want to go ahead and do that. And so if you're lending money, you don't want to, like when we were growing up, had a lot of businesses, myself and my 5 siblings, and we had our own Boersma bank, literally, like we'd loan to one another and all of that. It's good if you're loaning family-wise or friends. Those can be often the ones that are the highest risk and of not getting paid anything. So you generally don't want to loan to family and friends as a general rule. We did, and nobody's ever defaulted in our immediate family. I heard something at one of my uncle's funeral where one of my cousins stiffed 3 of my brothers out of money. It's like, oops, that wasn't good. But it happens. I'm not saying that the 3, anyways, we won't go there. So Kenny, you're looking at, do they have the ability to repay the funds? That's the number one thing. And if you're the lender, if you're loaning somebody money, you have to determine that. So if they have a job, what if they lose the job? And then the second most important thing is collateral. If they don't pay, what happens then? So that's, so if you have property, real estate is typically the best collateral as long as, you don't have, as long as you can sell the real estate. But if the real estate's worth, $500,000 and you have 100,000, you think you're in a good position, but you don't realize there might be $500,000 of liens against the property that are ahead of yours. So so that might not be good collateral, because if they have a $400,000 mortgage and then they have, I don't know, maybe somebody else did some work and they put 100,000. So now they have 100,000. But foreclosing on property is not an easy thing. It's costly, and I don't think you get reimbursed for that. So you've got attorney's fees. It's a pain. So you don't want, if you have any concern that somebody's going to pay you back, you don't want to loan to them typically. You just don't. So it's a good place to be, to have an analytic that's a little cynical and skeptical of everybody. And so you might think that, and then what interest rate do you charge? Well, that's a little dicey. I have an attorney friend of mine, and he did some research in Indiana. So you have federal laws that cover the whole country. Then you have state laws that just cover the state. And sometimes it's not clear, a federal law might give this law and a state law might be different. So they try not to go ahead and stomp on each other, but there's so many laws that they do. So in the state of Indiana, my attorney friend, he said that you can't charge more than, I don't know what it was. Let's say it's 12%. And so unless you're a bank or a financial institution, then you can charge, up to 30% or whatever. So you don't want to sue somebody to get your money back. And you don't want to foreclose on something either. But if there is a lien on the property, if there is a lien on the property, they can't sell that property. If you register a lien against a property, when they go to sell that property, it's going to come up, and they can't go ahead and sell that property until they go ahead and take care of that lien. But they may not sell the property for 10 or 20 or 30 years. So I was raised Baptist, so Christian. You'd think that Christians would be, I'm very nervous about loaning to Christians. So you might think, well, I'm part of the Jewish community. They're not going to go ahead and, they're not going to stiff one another. So in the mortgage industry, when I was in the mortgage industry, they have something called predatory lending, and that's taking advantage of other people. And so, if interest rates are going to be 7% for, a mortgage, and you're charging, let's say 12%, for a construction loan or something like that, somebody could say you're taking advantage of it. But that might not be a taking advantage at all. It's high risk, higher return. So the higher the risk, the higher the return. There was something that Kenny and I were looking into, and with a bank, I think they were charging, I don't know, whatever, 10% interest rate, whatever they were charging. But then they had fees that were another 5%. And it's like, so then you have fees. And so you have the interest rate and you have fees. So these big institutions, I'm not saying you shouldn't trust them. I'm just saying they know how to make money, and they make it from you. And so, but there's a reason they're making money, because there's costs associated with doing business, with them. And so, in the residential, like in the home, when you're buying a home, a residential property, that's the lowest interest rate you're going to get. Everything else goes up higher than that. Business loans, equipment loans. Like if you put an excavator as collateral, better than nothing. But what if all of a sudden you can't find the excavator? So again, you don't want to go ahead and be pursuing somebody to collect payment. So it's, from my perspective, you want to tread carefully in going through that. And then the banks, they have an entire application. So you might go ahead and get, an application from a bank. They're asking for the information for a reason. So you just go ahead and take that application, and you have the people fill out that application, because that information can be valuable. And then do you, pull up a credit report on them? You probably do. If you do, you got to go ahead and get their permission. I think it might be in writing. So you could go ahead and you could get sued if you go ahead and loan money to somebody and you don't have all your I's dotted, T's crossed. And then there's people who know how to game the system. So the credit report, your credit reporting stuff. So if you're doing, one or two loans, it's not going to make money for you. You're going to lose money when you look at the time. But it's kind of an interesting exercise. And if you got companies that, you just have so much money that don't know what to do with it, well, then you can go in and research it. Other questions, Kenny, that you have?
No, that makes sense. If we can, yeah, work on a system and get an application together and make that whole process easier.
So I tell people straight up, so I work with investors and I have a bunch of different investors I work with that I have access, that they trust me to make sure, that they make sure that, I'm only referring to people that'll pay. But I'm not guaranteeing that the people I refer them are paying. I'm just saying, hey, here's an opportunity. In commercial lending, it's different. So I got into a residential mortgage company, Preferred Mortgage Associates, but then I started doing commercial lending. I love commercial lending because residential lending, most all the rules are kind of black and white-ish. Not really, but kind of more so because they're ruled by the government, the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Those are the two big government institutions that say, here's all of this stuff. We won't even go into packaging loans and all of that. It's an interesting thing, though. It's good to know, especially as a business person. But commercial lending, the bigger weight is on the property in the commercial side. But the key is, can they repay? And if they don't repay, how much work and time, and is it possible to go ahead and, foreclose on it? And so, if it's a building, you got to make sure that they have insurance on it. Or, if they buy a truck, well, what if that truck gets in an accident and blows up? So all of a sudden, all your collateral just blew up into flames, or somebody steals it. And so, yeah, there's a whole bunch of things that you got to be aware of. Anything else, Kenny, that you had today you wanted to go over?
I don't think so.
Bill, what would you like to accomplish today?
Well, I'm just at home trying to get my horse. I got a horse. I didn't tell you, but I don't think I did. I love standardbreds, and that's kind of my side thing in the winter here when it's too cold to do ponds. I got a horse sale on Saturday. I'm taking some horses to sell. I'm trying to shine them all up and everything. Yeah, that's what I'm doing this week.
Nice. Nice. Just like selling cars, shine them up, make them look good. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. So I'm interested. Any thoughts that you have from Coffee Connection, Bill?
No, not really. But I keep thinking about this story that I was going to tell you sometime when I was growing up about how it went with me and the neighbor kid with my pigeons. So that might be interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of, and I know it's a lesson that I learned, and sometimes my wife will even remind me. You remember those pigeons? When I get tempted to. So I had. I think I was about 12.
Aren't wives wonderful for helping to remind us on some of the things? That's cute. I like that. My wife does that too. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, okay. When I was about 11, we moved a couple miles on the other side of town, and we had new neighbors, and they had a boy that was about a year older than me, and so we kind of got to be friends, and we spent a lot of time together. And I can't remember how this started, but we used to go catch pigeons, and so I had this pair of pigeons that they were unique. they reminded me of a woodpecker. They were really colorful. So every time they had babies, actually, this is what they had when they had babies. Every time they usually had two babies at a time, and one was, colored like a woodpecker. I mean, it was not red, but it was white and black. And so the neighbor boy he had some pigeons too, but he thought mine were really nice. So he talked me into going into we do a partnership with these pigeons. We throw them all together. So after we did that, he says, "Well, it's about my turn to have those nice pigeons at my house." Well, I was like, "Oh, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to let him take them over to his house, but I did." And we'd walk right by his pigeon shanty to go to school. We went to the Amish school over on the next road, so we crossed the fields there, and we'd go by there every day. So, well, I noticed that he wasn't taking care of his pigeons. They'd be out of water all the time, and that bugged me. But yep, sure enough, my special pigeons died because they were not taken care of. So that was a valuable lesson to me. I'll never forget it.
Right.
So,
and the thing that's hardest about lessons in life is we often learn the wrong things from the lessons and not the right things.
And maybe I did. Maybe I didn't learn the right thing out of that.
Well, I'm with your wife, though. I mean, I got a story when I was 18, 19 years old. I went to Faith Baptist Bible College in Ankeny, Iowa. It's where I met my wife. My parents said, we want all you kids to go to 1 year Bible college. And I'm like, and we had to pay for it too. And it wasn't cheap. So to honor my parents, I went ahead and said, okay, I'll go to 1 year Bible college, and to honor my parents and for find a wife too. Like, okay, that's probably a pretty good place to find a wife, which was successful, which I'm thankful for 40 years later. Anyways, my brother had started a pop business in the, in his dorm. And when he was a year older than me, so he was out there and he had started one. I'm like, that's a pretty good idea. So I went ahead and started a pop business. And so, people, rather than going to the store, they come to your dorm and they buy pop. Well, I took it, shockingly, I took it to another whole level. I mean, I had a full convenience store in my dorm. I mean, big. I mean, I had hundreds, if not thousands, of bottle of pop. I mean, and I had chips and I had all kinds of stuff. So what I did is when they'd go on sale, the pop, and this is back when they're in the big, in the glass jars and everything like that.
Oh yeah.
And I had refrigerators that they had cold and everything. And the president of the college, he had heard that there was some guy that had quite a convenience store. I didn't have a license for it. I didn't have anything. I'm like, hey, I'm just this slow entrepreneur, the little entrepreneur. And he came over and visited. He said, "You got quite an operation here," and I did. I mean, it was huge. Got to be so big that I actually diversified and went into the two of the girls' dorms. So these were apartments. And, guys couldn't go in girls couldn't go in guys. I'm like, well, I'm going to start. My wife, she was one of my distributors before we were even dating. And I realized at that time, like so many lessons, so once I go to collect the money, so I pick up all the old, deliver all the stuff, and I collect the money. And I'm like, okay, here's the money based on, and she's like, well, there's no money. I'm like, what do you mean there's no money? She's like, there's no money. I'm like, how's there no money? What happened to my money? Like, she and I were really good friends, but I was not a happy camper. She's like, well, all the girls in the dorm wanted pizza. I'm like, okay, I don't mind selling it and have a markup. I'll do that. But she's like, and so, they needed money. And so why not just go to the, pop? I'm like, that's my money. I'm not funding some girl. So I learned something about my wife, but I still married her. but I try to have financial checks in place to make sure she's not giving away money improperly. So that was one
Oh
lesson.
boy.
Another lesson is it was on an honor system. Now this is a Baptist college. They're training people to go to become pastors and missionaries. So they come in. I'm not going to pay somebody to man the store. Say they come in. I actually ran a credit operation, like people could buy stuff on credit. I mean, it was pretty significant. And so all of a sudden I'm balancing out my books. I'm finding people are stealing from me. I'm like, what? like, and I guess I was kind of
So you,
whining. And the RA, the resident advisor, he was in the dorm. Normally there was 4 people in the dorm, but there were only 2 in ours, just him and I. And I had the big section. That's why I had such a sprawling operation. And he looked at me one day, he says, Mark, stop your complaining about people stealing from you. He said, that's part of the cost of doing business. Stop your whining. Like, it's a cost of doing business. If you don't want to do it, get out of business. And I thought, well, that's pretty good advice. So I didn't go to business school until after, I finished the 1 year there, but they didn't teach me anything like real life, learning real life, like the pigeons. Here's the pigeons. Like, be really careful who you partner with because they'll kill your pigeon.
yeah.
And then they don't
Yep.
even care. They don't care about the
Yeah.
pigeon. They don't care about anything. Like, anyways, so I'm like, okay, now that I'm not going to whine about it, what am I going to do? So I made up a sign and I put it on when they came in to the apartment to go ahead and buy food. I said, did you come to a Bible study or Bible school to learn how to be a pastor and a missionary and steal from me?
Did that take care of it?
It did.
Yeah.
Like, it cleaned that bad boy up. It was so cool. It was like, holy cow. Until somebody ripped out the sign. And then one more funny story. So I was making, quite a bit of money. Like, I was making some good money and I was doing an enterprise. And so somebody upstairs decided that they were going to compete against me. And I'm like, and they started taking business from me because they started charging less than I charge. And I'm like, well, this isn't good. And then finals week was coming up, which when your sales bumped up like 10 times, people are buying Mountain Dew to stay up all night. I mean, it was good times during finals week. And this guy upstairs, he's like, and we're having this price war. And I'm like, this is killing my business. So I'm not advocating what I did was right. I'm not saying it was right. It wasn't illegal. It was just interesting. So I'm like, well, I know what I'm going to do because he doesn't have the capital I do. He doesn't have all the systems I have. And so he goes out and so I would buy up tons of pop when it was on sale. So I could, have the margins that I needed to make money. So what I did is we went into a price war. He started it. It's like James Bond. He doesn't, shoot first, but you better kill him. So he started the price war. I finished it. And so I drove the price down below the cost. And then I had some of my people from downstairs go up and buy out all his inventory.
Wow.
And there was no sale. So I bought out all of his inventory. It was below cost. So he lost money, bought out all his inventory, brought it all down, and then he went out of business. And it's like, well, good lesson. He shouldn't be a business guy. He should be a pastor. Like, I'm just saying. In closing, I feel that I can trust you guys. And if I do something inappropriate, you tell me. So I'm out in Denver, and Tom Ninnis, I've known him for over 20 years. And so I'm meeting up with him. And I don't know, I told him, yeah, we had moved to Indiana and it's Amish territory. He said, I have an Amish joke for you. You want to hear it? So I have an Amish joke for you guys, but I'm a little concerned. I'm a little concerned. You may have heard the joke. I don't know. But you guys want to hear an Amish joke?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, if it's inappropriate, we'll have to edit it out because I don't want to get in trouble. There's this Amish guy, and he's in a carriage and he's going, and the horse goes ahead and goes off to the side and eats, some clover. And the Amish, you've heard this story? No. Okay.
No.
So you haven't heard this story. So the Amish guy goes ahead and says, the horse says, that's once. Like that's once. Don't do that again to the horse. Horse goes down the road a little bit further and goes and gets some alfalfa. And, and the Amish guy says to the horse, that's twice. And then he goes down a little bit further and the horse does it a third time. The Amish guy gets out a gun, shoots the horse. Like that's 3 times, shoots the horse. The wife, she's not happy because that was their best horse. And she starts really like ragging on the guy. She starts saying, that was our best horse. And she's yelling and she's not happy with the guy, her husband. She says, what'd you do? And he says, that's once.
Oh.
So I used that joke on my wife. Like, that's once, honey. Then she tried to reverse the joke and use it against me. Is that a joke I should tell Amish or not?
I think it's fine.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to be offended.
All right. Well, if they are, I'll blame you, Bill.
Okay.
I'll throw you under the bus. Luke, anything you got?
Yeah, a little bit in the finances. Like, what happens if you give a customer an estimate and then you go on your estimate? Like, how do you know
Your
when to
estimate's
suck it up
higher
and when?
than what you want to have, or your actual's higher than what you actually estimated.
Yes.
Yeah. So here's my philosophy on that. A lot of customers thinks estimates are quotes. They don't think of them as estimates, they think of them as quotes. So it's communication with your customers on the upfront. So when Bill did our pond, again, the guy's a genius. Like he gave us an estimate. And he said, now this estimate, he was very clear in his communication. He said, now this estimate, I'm estimating number of hours that it's going to take. And so he didn't really tell me, but I knew based on what he said, it was clear. Like he and I were clear. Like if it takes more time than what he's estimating, I'm going to go ahead and, it's going to be more. And as it turns out, he would nailed the estimate. Like he says, well, it's a little extra more. It's like 15 minutes more or 20, something like that. But don't worry about it, Mark. But we gave him more. And then he laughed because he said, oh, you're giving me a tip. I said, well, so I wanted to be fair to him and he was being fair to me. So you want to communicate to the customer, this is an estimate. Now, if it comes in at less than what you're estimating, I think it's only fair. If you're going to charge the customer more, if it comes in at less, then you should go ahead and charge them less. If the estimate's a quote and you come in and it took more time or less time to do it, you made more money than you thought. If it's a quote, you can make more money because you took the risk on. People don't mind when you charge them less, but they do not like when you charge them more. And so, if you charge them more than the estimate, they can get pretty testy about that, and that can cause you to lose the customer or people can be unhappy. So you're always looking at the business, and then are you charging them more? Is it more because of your own poor choices or because of your own poor planning? Those types of things. And then you can let the customer know, so if it's going to be 20% more than the estimate, make sure that they're clear. It's an estimate. It could be more. When they're adding new things onto it, then you need to let them know, hey, this is going to cost more. So you want to communicate them throughout the process. You don't want to surprise it, spring it at the very end. Bill, did you have any other suggestions?
No, I think what you were saying was exactly the way I like to do it. communicate. You know, if you're going to run, if you're going to see you're going to run tight, especially, you know, keep communicating and tell them, no, this is where we're at. Which is a little bit different for Kenny if he's using supplies, but if I'm just doing mostly hourly, you know, I can afford to sometimes back off a little bit, but I like to tell them it depends what we run into, but it looks like this is what it's going to be, and then as we go, I tell them, so this is where we're at now, and yeah, but yeah.
And then how you work, Luke, too, is if they see you working hard throughout the whole process, you know, you guys are running hard, working hard, all of that kind of stuff, and you're communicating to them. But if they see that you're sloppy, if they see, you know, you're kind of taking long breaks, you're doing this, or you're messing things up, or you're making mistakes, they don't want to pay more because you messed something up. That's on you. That's not on them. Does that help,
Right.
Luke?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Anybody else have anything else?
That's it for me.
All right. Make sure you guys share this with other people. The monthly live coffee connection is really good. But it's the weekly 30-minute where you get to know each other, you start sharing, you're following through on what you learned and what you're doing and all of those kind of things. So the combination of the monthly, you know, where you get together in person, and then the weekly 30-minute live session, that's where it is. You have any questions, connect with the individual who invited you to participate, or you can call toll free 630-393-9909. Sorry, that's 888-230-2300. Outside the U.S., 630-393-9909. And always remember, we can accomplish so much more together than we ever could on our own. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.